Hello there, and welcome to the EDC Empire. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Forge De Laguiole. This is a French knife made by Forge De Laguiole, and it is called the Laguiole. It's a pretty, I don't want to say well-known, it's a very historical pattern of a French knife, and I'm not going to get into the full history of it. There are many YouTube videos getting into the history. Also, if you look up Forge De Laguiole, they will give you a whole history dump. But this is a very interesting knife, born off of the common person, and then it kind of worked its way up into the wealthy home, and now it is just a pocket knife which people carry. This is a pretty base model with brass bolsters and ebony scales. But we're going to be taking a look at this today. Before I get further into the review, I want to say that this is a semi or fully mirror polished blade, and I am going to be handling it without gloves, so it's going to get smudgy. So enjoy its wonderful shiny perfection while it lasts. It will not stay like this. Also, when I show you it, I can hold it up for a portion of the review, but it is going to lay like this because it's pretty much impossible to get it to lay flat. Alright, moving on from that, this is obviously a slip joint. It's got this really beautifully ornate backspring and this weird 60 or 65% stop, which we'll get into later. It mainly, or the only method of opening it is a nail nick, but you can also really easily pinch this knife open, and that's really what I've been using the rest of the time. The blade on the Laguiole is a T12 steel, and that means that it can be compared to a lot of things, because depending on where this steel is made, whether it's made in the UK or if it's made in France, it can be compared to different things because it's made differently in those two different areas. From what I can tell, it is similar to 14C28N, or it is similar to 420HC, or it is considered, or it is similar to AEBL. You can do with that as you will. In my experience, French knives, like with the Opinels, they don't have the greatest steel ever, and they make up for it in geometry. That being said, this thing has been performing wonderfully. I've only really had to strop it up. I haven't had to sharpen it yet, and it has been wonderful to carry. I have not carried it nearly as much as other knives, but I've had this knife for quite a while, and when I have carried it, it's been a joy. So yeah. The blade shape is I would call this a clip point with a fully flat ground blade coming down to a really nice thin edge. The overall length on the Laguiole is 6.88 inches with when unfolded, and when folded it is 3.78 inches. That means we're going to get into some size comparisons. Instead of the PM2, we're going to bring in my newly acquired Para 3 because that's a little bit more consistent, and then we've got the Delica, and then after the Delica and the Para 3, we've got the Mini Griptilian and the Civivi Elementum. And then to bring in two kind of traditional style knives, one of which is a lot more popular, but they're both pretty well known. We've got the Case Trapper, and we've got the Jack Wolf Knives Vampire Jack. And then with that, my final size comparison, I'm going to bring in the Opinel number 8, the standard sized Opinel. It's a little bit larger, but both of these French knives are pretty cool. All right, the overall depth when folded is 0.78 inches, meaning that it's pretty thin. We'll bring in the Civivi Elementum, and you can tell it's a lot thinner. It's not difficult to carry. It's actually almost as wide as it is deep, which is very interesting, and it's pretty easy just to throw in the pocket, throw in a watch pocket, throw in a back pocket, throw it in a jacket pocket. The first few weeks that I had it, I was wearing a lot of flannels, so I just threw it in one of those top flannel pockets, and it was great. The width at the pivot is 0.47 inches, meaning that compared to your Para 3, it's thinner, but about the same, just a little bit less. And then your thickness at the widest point is 0.68, which the thickest point is right at this center pin, creating the shepherd's cross. And you can tell it's definitely quite a bit thicker. The blade length on this knife is 3.1 inches with an actual edge length of 2.8 inches. Then you have a blade stock of 0.11 inches, which is a little bit thicker than you'd expect, but it actually still is very thin and very usable. This has been really a joy to carry, and it's just a nice little secondary EDC knife. I do not recommend, and I never did carry this on its own in the fear of needing something that was locking, which, to be honest, was completely unnecessary. This could have and did do all of the tasks which I would need from it. The only thing I would be worried about, which this is really for any of my slip joints, is opening up a clamshell package or something like that. But even that, if I really was careful, I think I could have done. The weight is 1.90 ounces, which means the weight to blade ratio is fantastic. This thing is wonderful. For a blade length of over 3 inches and then a weight of less than 2 ounces, you can't complain about these ratios. And that really comes down to not the materials used, but just how thin this knife is when it's unfolded. And when it's folded, it's just very thin. And getting into that, you would expect that the ergos of this knife are awful. And that was what I was afraid of. I got this at a outdoorsman shop where they had Benchmades and Spydercos and Microtex, and I chose this. This thing was very comfortable. It is very comfortable. If you want to choke back, you can choke back because you got this little banana shape. If you want to choke up, you've got this like little flat area. You got to be a little bit careful not to ride up onto the edge, but it's comfortable. If you want to do a pinch grip, this little curve really does work well on the palm to be able to do your pull through cuts. It just works very well. I don't have a complaint about this knife in the ergonomics department. The action is really interesting. I brought down these two slip joints for a reason. You probably are used to something with a half stop, something where it just stops right here, and that's supposed to be a safety measure. Personally, I'm not sure how much of a safety measure it is, because if it's going here, it's gonna snap your finger, and I've already cut myself a number of times right here by doing that, and not with actual use, but when I was doing this. And yeah, I don't know about how much of a safety feature it is, but that is a feature on a lot of knives. The other style that's common is to not even have a stop, and it just kind of goes. This doesn't technically have a stop, but it kind of does. Like I mentioned earlier, it kind of stops at the 60-65% mark, which means that when you're opening it, it just kind of goes down. It doesn't really snap there, it just kind of stops. And that means that the rest of this is detent, which is kind of interesting. In my opinion, the detent closed is like a 6 to 7, and then the open locked detent is maybe like a 5 to a 6. So it's kind of weird. That also may be kind of a trick of the mind by just how much you have to pull out and then how little it just locks into place, but it definitely feels like the locked into place is looser than the lock closed is, or the detent closed is. But I definitely think it's perfectly serviceable for a light duty knife, and like I said, it just stopping here is really interesting, very fidgety, and also means that with that lighter detent, you're gonna be fine. And it's pretty similar, in my opinion, to what the Case Trapper's lockup is, and they both are perfectly fine to use. The edge of this knife, and in my opinion, is my least favorite part, and is really the part which bugs me the most. This is probably, this model right here was about $180 from the shop that I got it. Depending on the version that you want, the handle materials, they jump up in price. They also can go lower, but that's about what you're going to be spending on the 9cm version. You can also find them for lower, but there also are going to be other producers and whatnot, which we're going to get into later. But the edge on this, it starts off at a pretty nice thickness, and then it starts to thin, and then right about here it thickens up again, and then it thins again. It's a little bit disappointing, but it's also very serviceable, and it works. I can fix this when I sharpen it, and really, other than the aesthetics, it doesn't really do a whole lot. Past that, this knife is beautiful. The fit and finish on this is great, comparable to my GEC 87, which I definitely should have brought down here, but it's wonderful. The fit and finish far surpasses like a case knife, and the bolsters to the covers is almost perfect. The pins don't stick up at all. They are just flush. The shepherd's cross is great. It looks awesome, very even, very consistent, and overall just everything looks great. The backspacer is beautiful, wonderfully engraved, and it's just a wonderful knife. It's not perfectly centered, but you can kind of push it over to be pretty close to center, and that's not the biggest issue in my opinion. It's a little bit annoying, but I'm not going to complain about it. The Laguiole knife is something which has been copied. Technically, what Forge De Laguiole says is that only a true Laguiole knife is made in the town of, or in the town which they produce them, and I can't remember quite, in village of Laguiole, which is debatable. I don't know. There are other companies which I believe also do produce in the village of Laguiole, but there are also a lot of Chinese companies which make these, which are definitely not the same quality. They might be the same pattern, but they're not going to be the same quality. But in my opinion, the Forge De Laguiole knife is of wonderful quality, especially for the price. If you have experiences with other Laguioles, please comment down below and tell me what you think. But yeah, overall, I really like this knife and highly recommend it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and comment down below if you have any other information on the Laguiole knife. Thanks for watching.